Welcome to our video on Illinois Landlord-Tenant laws. As a landlord, you need to know your responsibilities and rights to manage your rental well. To help you do that, here are some lease and landlord-tenant laws you need to know in the Prairie State. The lease agreement is the foundation of the landlord-tenant relationship. It's a legally binding contract between a landlord and a tenant that establishes the terms of the rental relationship. The most common type of lease agreement is a one-year, fixed-term lease that terminates at the end of the lease term. This is often referred to as a standard lease agreement. In addition to the terms of the lease, Illinois landlords have some additional requirements and disclosures that must be included in the lease agreement. Here's an overview of those requirements. Illinois landlords must provide carbon monoxide detectors within 15 feet of where tenants sleep and include information about carbon monoxide detectors in the lease agreement. Landlords must provide smoke detectors throughout the rental unit. Tenants are responsible for upkeep, so landlords should provide information about maintenance and testing. If a tenant must pay a portion of a master utility, the formula to calculate the tenant's share must be disclosed. Any concession for rent must be noted in the lease agreement with a heading stating concession granted in letters at least half an inch tall. Failure to do so when there is a concession is considered a misdemeanor in Illinois. Illinois landlords are not required to test for radon, but if they do and discover the presence of radon, they must disclose this to tenants. This is not applicable to units on the third floor or higher. Pursuant to federal law, if a property was built before 1978, tenants must be provided with a lead-based paint disclosure and pamphlet.
Next, let's talk about key landlord-tenant laws in Illinois. In Illinois, there are no limits on the amount of the security deposit as long as it's reasonable. For buildings with 4 units or less, there are no specific rules about returning the security deposit. Landlords of buildings with more than 4 units must return the security deposit within 45 days of when the tenant moves out. Illinois does not provide specific guidelines about entering a property for non-emergencies, but we always recommend that landlords provide reasonable notice, which is usually 24 hours. If a landlord charges a late fee, it may not exceed $20 or 20% of the rent amount due, whichever is greater. Illinois landlords may require tenants to get renters insurance and can make failure to do so a breach of the lease agreement. We recommend all landlords do this. Return payment fees in Illinois may not exceed $25. It's important that landlords are familiar with lease termination and renewal laws. Fixed-term leases usually terminate at the end of the lease term, unless otherwise stated in the lease agreement. Illinois month-to-month leases can be terminated by either party with 30 days' notice. Illinois law does not impose a limit on how much a landlord can increase the rent. However, the lease should specify the procedures and notice requirements for rent increases. Illinois law requires landlords to maintain the rental property in a habitable condition. This includes ensuring that essential services like plumbing, heating, and electricity are functioning correctly. Tenants must promptly notify landlords of any necessary repairs.
Tenants in Illinois have specific rights, including the right to withhold rent if the landlord fails to make essential repairs within a reasonable time. Retaliation by the landlord against tenants is strictly prohibited. If a tenant fails to pay rent or violates the lease agreement, the landlord may initiate the eviction process. The process must adhere strictly to Illinois law, and the landlord cannot resort to self-help eviction methods, such as changing locks or shutting off utilities. Congratulations, you're now familiar with key lease laws and you're ready to create your Illinois lease. While these laws might sound complicated, remember that our Illinois lease automatically includes all required disclosures and gives you state assist tips throughout the lease building process. Before you turn over possession of your rental, make sure you've screened all tenants, have an executed Illinois lease agreement, and you've collected the entire security deposit and first month's rent. As you manage your rental, keep in mind that we have over 400 property management forms. These include Illinois-specific forms like the Illinois Landlord-Tenant brochure and 5-day notice to pay rent. Visit easylandlordforms.com to start your tenant screening. Create an Illinois lease agreement that's guaranteed to comply with all Illinois lease laws, and access Illinois property management forms.